So I know what you guys are thinking. I know what you guys are thinking. It's the NFL offseason. There's not a lot to talk about. Hey, workouts are happening. Oh, this guy is the healthiest he's been in his life. But what if I told you there's another football league out there that you can get involved in? The Canadian Football League. And who better to talk about all things CFL than my press box pal from the Toronto Argonauts and Sportsnet, David Morassutti. David, how are we doing tonight?
We're good. CFL football is back. I always love when people say football is back when the NFL
Yes.
comes back, and I'm like, football's been back for a bit, ladies and gentlemen. CFL football is back.
Yes, it is. CFL football is back. It's also good too because it does take away a bit of that, like, when there's a lull where you're like, I can't wait for the NFL to get here. It's like that nice, and this is not a knock on the CFL, but it's like that nice appetizer before, like, like the big dog comes
Hmm.
back. That's how I view it. But there's so much to talk about this year with this league. And here's the best thing about the CFL too, I always say. That it's any season, anyone has a chance to win because of how many teams there are in the league. It's simple as that.
Remember when Cody Fajardo got mad at the media or got mad at people putting the Alouettes low in the power rankings, all just for them to win the Grey Cup at the end of the day?
Yep.
I've seen many things in my time covering this league. I when I first started covering this league, it was 2016. I've seen Calgary at the height of their dynasty, height of their dominance, lose to teams without a winning record or a 500 record. As the CFL has showed you, just get there, anything can happen. It's like most sports, honestly. You get there, anything can really happen. But the CFL, that is especially true.
It is. And I also just say that anyone can win because how you can go from like I said this last year once I got my because like I was still getting my feet wet with covering the league, getting to know the league, know the players, and I eventually realized, hey, what teams have truly have a chance to win? What teams, like next year, like even now, I look at it where I'm like, there's maybe 2 to 3 teams. I'm like, can't see them winning in 2024. But then there are teams where it's like, hey, they play their cards right, everything can go right, and you can also go from having a 6, 7 win season to winning 14, 15 games. It's not like the NFL where it's like, oh, you see worst to first. Like the quick switches can be made very quickly.
Oh, no, very quickly. And again, it's never how you start in this league, it's how you finish. Montreal was
Yes.
one of the hottest teams in the league. They won on like 7 straight
Yep.
wins. I've seen it many times before, and again, sometimes teams get stagnant. Sometimes things get a little easy. I wouldn't say easy, but you just go through the motions. I think that's what happened to
Off the
Toronto
gas.
last year. It
Yeah.
just they got complacent because they're trying to they were playing games, but they were trying not to get hurt. They were trying to just maintain the record, but also not push things too hard. And then when the playoffs came, the intensity went up. They couldn't match it.
I also say this with Toronto because I always remember thinking, okay, that could happen. But then there's the game against Hamilton where I remember asking Ryan specifically, how are you going to treat this week? And once he said that's more of a media narrative, and like they didn't even start Chad Kelly, who we're going to talk about in a little bit. And it's like, hey, we're just playing just to get out there and get healthy. I'm like, okay, they're kind of doing this dual vision thing, but then they got comfortable and placent. Then obviously when the light shined brightest, they didn't show up. I also say that too because I took the GO train down for every single game last year, but the East final. So maybe if I continue to take the GO train, they'll win it all. But we'll have to wait and see on that. It's just like even going back to your article point. I remember I did an article at the end of last season. Each team made the playoffs. What are their odds to win the Grey Cup? I think I gave Toronto like an 8 or a 9. I gave Montreal a 3 because I was like, you know what? I can't see it. There's no way. And then they make it, and I go to the Grey Cup, and I get to talk to all their players, and I'm like, this team's unbelievable. Now their best receiver, Austin Max, in the NFL. They like that game. Toronto. I want to jump to Toronto for a second. I know I'm jumping all over the place, but I want to jump to them because there's 2 games right away that pop out to me. Their home opener against BC. I feel like it's gonna be a
Mhm.
great test just to see where both teams are. Considering, look, both Toronto got a little decimated, obviously on the coaching side of the ball. Hamilton basically said, "Hey, your defense burned us all last year, so we're just going to take all your players from you." And obviously, BC's got Willie Stanback at running back now, so it's going to be a very interesting season. Also, considering too, there not only do you have the Grey Cup rematch opening week, but you have the losers of the finals matchup that same week too. And then when Montreal comes to town on June 28th as well, that's going to be a great. I don't know if the revenge element's going to be there, but there's definitely going to be. I could sense Toronto's going to have a bit of that fire underneath them to win that night.
Oh, absolutely. We talked about I think the biggest part about Toronto is not just losing, it's losing when you had your best crowd in history,
Yes.
right? And so that's what I'm curious about is how much momentum potentially was lost by them losing out the way they did. That's going to be a key one for Toronto. But I do agree that this year has a lot more intrigue just because in the East, especially, you can't say one team for sure is going to win that division. I think you
No.
can make cases for each team, but if you try to, I don't know what the betting odds are right now for each division in the CFL. I would say the East is probably a tougher one to navigate just because there's so much uncertainty with every team. It's tough to kind of say, "Yep, I like this team odds to win more than this team." Then you can make flaws in every single team.
So I'm just looking it up at the moment. I tried, and by the way, this is it could be a sponsorship one day, but it's not. I tried looking up on points, but they didn't have it, so I'm going to go to FanDuel because I know them and ScoreBet released odds so far for like the leagues you were saying. Let me just get to it quickly. All sports. Let's go to football, CFL. So they don't have okay. So team win totals. Actually, no. Just Grey Cup futures straight up.
Okay,
So
they'll help to figure that out.
the teams with the three worst odds are Ottawa, Edmonton, and the one that's a surprise to me is Calgary. They're all at plus 2,000. Saskatchewan's plus 1,100. If you're a sucker for value, and I only say this, I know we're Argos and Ticats are the enemy, quote unquote, but plus 750, and I think they're loading up because they don't want to get past 25 years on their drought. For those of you who don't know, every team in the CFL has won a Grey Cup since the year 2000, but the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Argonaut fans love the clown on them for it. Like if you guys think that there's rivalries like in the NFL, CFL and like Hamilton Toronto is one of the fiercest rivalries you'll see. But then also you have Toronto at plus 550, Montreal at plus 500, BC at plus 490, and Winnipeg at plus 200. If you're looking for value there, I think Hamilton might be the play if you really want to get some skin on the game on who's going to win the Grey Cup.
Where's Saskatchewan on that?
They have the sixth highest odds at plus 1100.
If I were to put money down right now, I'd throw a little coin on Saskatchewan.
Their win total's only at at 7.5.
Like I would even go high. Like here's the thing about Saskatchewan. I know we want to focus on Toronto on the East a little bit, but Saskatchewan went through a huge culture shift. Right? They bring in Corey Chamberlain. Sorry, Corey Chamberlain.
Mace.
Why did I say Corey Chamberlain? Wow, Corey Mace. Corey Chamberlain was once a coach of Saskatchewan. He was also you know what it was? For those you don't know, Frank Sinishi, a good friend of ours, covers this CFL. We had a podcast earlier, and I brought up Corey Chamberlain's name, so that's why that happened. Sorry, Mr. Mace, Corey Mace. They bring in arguably one of the. I have to be very careful with how I word this, but upward trajectory. He was like one of the emerging head coaching candidates in the league,
Yes.
and they got him at the perfect time because I know last year,
He
I
signed an
believe
extension.
Ottawa kicked tires potentially on him as a head coach candidate. He wasn't ready, or he didn't really. They didn't really entertain that. They went internal and did Bob Dice, but Saskatchewan goes and grabs him. Now they go and they get AJ Ouellette. That's a good addition for that offense. Anytime you can bolster the running game, they're going to rely on health from Trevor Harris. I just think though that team will have Mace is such a good coach, and I think if they can just get that offense right, that's a team that can go and challenge Winnipeg, in my opinion. Now, will they go and win the West? I don't know. I doubt it. I think Winnipeg is still the team to be, but they're a sneaky option here, especially if they get off to a slow start. Again, as we said, it doesn't matter how they start potentially because I think the other teams in the West aren't at that other level where I'm worried about losing out on third place or even second place. BC, we'll see if they can maintain what they did last year, but I like Saskatchewan as a sneaky pick. I'm not going to come out and say for sure they're going to win a Grey Cup, But if you want a betting team, just to throw even like a little one of those, like throw a couple bucks and hope for a big payout because the odds are so favorable towards them, Saskatchewan would be my team. Hamilton, I know you like that. They did a lot this offseason. Look, I my first time in the league covering the league, Scott Milanovich was the head coach of the Argonauts. He's a very good coach. I just don't know if the quarterback is enough.
Yeah.
And the
Thing.
offense, particularly the offense, I don't know if they have enough there to say for sure that that's an offense that can compete with the elite teams. It would give him obviously with him having a full training camp and offseason to work as the head coach and instill what he wants. That could be a different story because last year Tommy Condell was the offensive coordinator. That didn't last long and he was gone.
Yeah.
That might help Hamilton, but we'll see.
That's just the thing. Like, I only say that for Hamilton because, like, I feel like externally you have a fan base that's starved. It's like the Buffalo Bill equivalent where the fans there, it's all they have. And that's not a knock on Hamilton, but they love their Tiger Cats. This area surrounding the stadium, like, look, there's flags and support everywhere. And they got to know it's like it's 25 years. It's like you're one of the historic franchises. You've not won in so long. And that's why I feel like they went out there and they're loading up. Plus, too, I feel like Steinauer, you know, either, hey, are you more football ops or are you more head coaching? So I feel like that's where as well that distraction gets lifted. But I, like you, agree that, look, I did speak to Bo at the Grey Cup. He was seemed good, like in a good headspace, but it's just if he's got to stay healthy for the full season, which we'll see if he can do. And then also, CFL is the one league where you do need a high-powered offense to get you going. If you look at Montreal last year, their offense got going at the right time, and they just they took off and they had all assets of the ball. Now with a team like Toronto, look, I'm not too worried about their receiver room per se. Like, I think, look, they still have. I think Brissett's going to be an emerging candidate to break out this year. Like, he's already good, but you know what I mean. Like, to be like that top dog in that room. But you still have, if you can get a healthy Coxie for the year, and then also to the guy who I think is wide receiver one of that room, Tavares Daniels. If you can get all three of them going, it's great. But my big concern with Toronto still is just running back. Because, look, you're not replacing the bell cow that was AJ Ouellette. It's kind of similar in a way to what Tennessee's probably going to go through from the Derek. You could speak on this too. The Derrick Henry, the Tony Pollard transition. Nothing bad about Adebayo or anything like that, but it's just, he's not the same bell cow. And it's also to the fact he had the high ankle sprain towards the end of or I think he broke his ankle actually towards the end of the season as well. So we'll have to see what happens there. One thing I will say about Adebayo, though, is I don't think I've ever seen a more supportive father of an athlete than his parents. His parents they love the Argos and everything like that. I see them on social media all the time.
Yeah, I've met his father many times at practice. They're there all the time. Like that's
home and away,
right? He's there in Guelph. He's been there in Guelph for training camp. He's been there more than I have in Guelph for training camp.
Me too.
But yeah, no, he's got a good support system. Like I was covering him a bit last year, and I was seeing it as the backup to eight when Harris was, I know that everyone was talking about Andrew Harris in his final year and Swan Song, but Dan Adeboboye was he was an emerging talent, and they saw that, and that's why they signed him to that lucrative contract extension. Now they're going with a bit of a committee though, with Kadeem Carey joining the fold, and if they get Kadeem Carey that we saw from a few years ago healthy, that's an important one. Healthy,
yes.
You're gonna think. I know everyone's concerned about the Argos' offense with the Chad Kelly situation. If they get that running game going, that takes a heck of a lot of pressure off of what will likely be Cameron Dukes to start the season, based on what I've been hearing from training camp.
The other question I wanted to ask you too about the quarterback room, I'll say this: I'm not too worried about Dukes just because I've seen him. Like same thing too. I get the flex here with this. I've talked to him. I've seen him play. He can do it all. Do we think we see anything elevated from Brian Scott in this offense, or do you think Brian's a break loss in case of emergency situation, kind of similar to the Nick Arbuckle signing from a couple days ago?
Yeah, I think they value what Cameron Dukes did last year, coming in and having some quality after that unfortunate situation in Calgary where he was kind of just thrown into the fire there. Chocolate gets hurt. It's a brutal situation just for him to go into. And then you saw him kind
Bad
of get more
situation.
comfortable. Like he got more comfortable. Man, this guy's first instance in the CFL. I talked to him right after that, and he said it's one thing to do in preseason, it's another to do in an actual game. But when you look at Brian Scott, they're two different quarterbacks. Brian Scott is all about pinpoint accuracy in the pocket. Cameron Dukes likes to extend the play and kind of go around. They're two different quarterbacks. Brian Scott struggled in the preseason last year, and like even Cameron Dukes had his struggles last year. So I feel like they just want to give these guys more reps. Do I see Brian Scott coming? I mean, it's only injuries, in my opinion. I don't see a
Yeah.
scenario right now where he wins out the job unless he has this amazing performance. And he looks head above what Cameron Dukes is doing. Nick Arbuckle, I know some people are wondering about that. I think that's just getting a veteran in the room. Let him compete. Look, again, I think they're still pushing on Dukes.
Yep.
We'll see. I think that it's still too early to say if Arbuckle knows Dinwiddie, they have that relationship in the past. I just think this was more of a they let go one quarterback. They've now got three quarterbacks again. I think that was more of a get a veteran in the room because these are young guys that even though Dukes had a few games last year, there's no one really to help mentor them along. It's almost like it's very similar to like McLeod, Bethel Thompson with Kelly, except McLeod was the starter, but he was still mentoring Kelly along the way as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think our like Brian Scott definitely break and look, Brian Scott follows me on Instagram, but one of two players. But he seems like he's putting in a lot of work in the offseason, but at the same time, too, I really want to see him, even though it is preseason, I do want to see him in action before you make that case. I do agree with your take on Arbuckle, though. Just get a vet in there. You know, when Duke, because say if Dukes goes in there, has a bad game, you can calm him down, just tell him, like, get him to relax, just, make sure, hey, everything's okay, everything's fine, like, take a couple breaths. And then from what we saw from Dukes last year, we know, because even too last year in the East Final, when they broke away from getting him into the quarterbacks, they did break away from him in his the QB rush game. Once you got him back in there, look, he can find those little holes and just take it to the house. So you know what? I'm not too worried about Toronto overall. It's just like I said, they've got that game against BC on that Sunday night because we know what happened last year against BC. It was the Robinson Daniel 3 INT game, including the pick six, and then Vernon Adams Jr. throwing 6 interceptions. I'll always remember this. Just BC's DB's room just talking shit the entire week, and then they got cooked. So it'll be great to see those two teams, especially like how I was saying. You have the teams where you want to evaluate them and see, hey, are they going to be contenders? And come November, what are their odds to get to Vancouver?
Right, and I think when you look at especially in Toronto's case, with so many changes that they made, I'm sure there's a lot of uncertainty of where they stand because they got gutted. If you
Yes.
look at who left in free agency, but I've been talking to some people. I talked to Ryan Dinwiddie last week, and he said, "Yeah, we lost some people. We still kept a lot of guys that made up the bones of our defense, right? McManus, Flo, well, I mean, everyone calls him Flo.
Okay.
They make the trade for Sedurna with Edmonton. I thought that was a pretty shrewd move on their part. Jonathan, they still like Jones, or they go JJ with the middle linebacker there. Yeah, their secondary is going to be missing guys, but Deshaun Amos is going to be back healthy, right?
Yes.
Pretty
Broke his
much,
ankle against Calgary.
right? So he was gone pretty much the rest of the year there. And they seem to be very high on the guys they brought in the secondary. It's young, it's got a lot of potential. It's also probably a lot the inexperience. There's gonna have to be some work done there. They got two guys in the back there in Amos and Meche. Oh, on Royce Mechie.
Yes.
Mechie. That's now how he wants to be pronounced. Those guys will kind of help get that group together. I think. I'm not too concerned about Toronto's defense. I know losing Corey Mason, that was probably the bigger blow.
Yeah.
You can change out players in the CFL. Like it's been shown, certain guys you can bring in, you find value in free agency or in the American guys coming up. It's more so the guys making the decisions, doing the coaching. It's a little bit that's the tougher one to get over. So we'll see how that kind of all works. But I think Argos fans give it a little time to see how everything can gel.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, I just say those two games because, and also the Edmonton game should be interesting as well, just considering how many former Argonauts are now there as well with Beatty, Leak, Curly, and all that stuff as well. I just say the BC and Montreal games just because like those are your measuring sticks, and to get two measuring sticks right out of the gate is going to be very important for them. I agree with you at the same time too. I'm going to say this as well, like for the betting folks out there, and I know myself too. Last year, a lot of bets were made on over in Toronto Argonauts points. I think that's another great value play to make again this year. Like, 'cause I think they're going to get into a lot of those like 30, 20 point shootout games. Um, Winton McManus is a huge portion to keep, not only for on-field play, but I always say this with football: you need to have cohesion in the locker room. Cameron Duke said this is one of the best locker rooms he's ever been a part of, and Winton McManus is kind of that glue that keeps everyone together. They still have the same voices internally that like, and I know there's a lot of like, look, there's a lot of heat externally for the internal stuff of everything that happened, but you have a room of guys and a band of brothers who are going to buy into the same cause and the same belief system that hey, we can go out there and win any given football on any given, whether it be Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Monday, because it's not any given Sunday in the CFL. Um, I think it's time we talk about it now. The whole Chad Kelly situation. I just want to say it's very unfortunate. I believe I know who the person the employee was that was terminated. I didn't know her, but like once I got to know the names because I know the strength. I know the head strength coach a little bit, the one guy, but her I didn't know, but I knew that too. So it's just an unfortunate situation. But the most I'll say about this is that I think just like the crime, like the punishment fits the crime. I like the fact too that he just came out and said, "Look, I screwed up. I'm going to serve my suspension." Because I think because if he were to appeal it and then play, I think that just is more that is more negative than positive for the whole situation as itself. But all in all, with this, it's just the fact it just sucks because it's like they signed Chad to this big contract. Like it seemed like a celebration day last summer when we were at Lamport doing the press conference, and then now you have all this. So we'll have to wait and see where it goes. But one question I have for you is if they got off to a great start, say if he only serves 9 or let's say 10 games, let's say 10 games. Say if they go 7-3 or like 8-2 during that stretch, like is it as simple as yep, hey Cameron, thanks for what you did, we're pulling you out and putting Chad back in, or is it you ride with Dukes? They're in a real catch-22 here with this whole situation, just everything like
Yeah.
when on and off the field, it's a big can of not a catch-22, it's a giant can of worms.
So there's two folds to this. I'll kind of say this about the whole situation. Yeah, I mean it's not a great situation, especially a star player in the league who literally just won the CFL's Most Outstanding Player award. Like that's the last thing the CFL wanted was him to be involved in anything like this. I haven't been a fan with how things have been handled because I think they tried to kind of I wouldn't say brush it off, but they're trying to use the excuse that it's in the legal system. We're gonna let that play out. Kelly might appeal so he can be around. I think that they should have just let Kelly be on the sidelines, not even be at the facility, like keep him away, right? Because you don't want to bring that negativity towards training camp. I don't know why they thought that was a good idea. Again, they made that mistake. They have to live with it.
Yeah.
When it comes to him, I think the first thing is the CFL is going to have to figure out what steps he will properly need. I know he has to go through counseling, he has to go through the whole training and all those things to get reinstated. Now, I guarantee the CFL, this is an opportunity for them to see how committed Chad Kelly really is to getting himself back on the field,
Yeah.
right? Before you even talk about whether he gets back as the Argos starting quarterback, I think the first thing the CFL needs to know is he going to take the right steps to rectify? Because I was very surprised. The reason why I was surprised about this whole thing coming out was I knew Kelly had a partner. I don't know if that was still current or I don't know what exactly his relationship status, but I knew at the time when he signed, he had a partner who was helping him with everything. But he has a past, right? We know he has a very, he had a lot of issues back when he was in college and also that incident when he was with the Broncos. I think the CFO needs to figure out how committed he is to not only being a good player on the field, but exemplary off the field.
Yes.
Okay. And he's done some work. This is the part is like when he signed his contract, there were kids from that were part of the MLSC Foundation. He's done a lot of
Launchpad.
work with the launch pad there and things like that. I remember all that. That's why this is the tough part is like he's viewed in some cases as a role model, and then something like this happens. He's got a reputation that he has to build up again. A lot of fans don't even want him around the team anymore, right? That's something he's an image he's going to have to repair. So I think the CFL has to figure out is how committed is he to fixing that? And once he does, it's going to be up to the Argos staff to decide A, is he ready to even
Yeah.
come back? Because he's not in training camp. He's going to have no game action. They're going to have to treat it like an injury in a lot of cases. They might even do one of those Cameron Duke starts, but Chad Kelly might get a little bit of time in a game, right? Things like that. They might have to do this like a slow ease him back. They're not just going to throw him to the fire, even if the team is good, unless the team is in
Not
dire
good.
straits and he's back and he's going to have to rescue, which I'd be the worst case scenario for him to be put back in. But I think before we even get to whether he'll get back, I think it's going to be important for the league to determine if he is going to be ready and in a position that the league feels that he is ready to be back on the field.
Yeah, that's the biggest one right there. It's like, how does the league view the whole situation? How does the league feel about everything? Because if the league feels good, it's great. Because if you bring him back at a time and it's like he's not ready, it just creates a giant PR nightmare for them, like it already has. Like, look, I know people in Toronto's media department. I know people in the CFL's media department. It's just everything they've dealt with, even to someone like Kristen Constable, who's come out and basically said that, like, look how vocal she has been about behind the scenes of how everything was handled. Just, I thought it was a very well worded statement on her part as she's a league employee. Um, the one big thing too with all this is I want to go back to that August press conference because I remember my question to him in pinball was how does it feel to knowing that Toronto fans and people who want to become fans of this team have a player to look up to? Look, you see the jerseys right behind you, except for the one to the right, because that's a little bit of an issue with me right now, of people the Leafs look up to. You have Barnes and the Raptors. You have, I know they're not the best right now, but like people look up to Vladdy and Bo. And now Toronto had that with Chad, where it's like, hey, you're the anchor of the franchise. You brought us a championship in an unlikely situation. And then it all kind of just flushed away when you decided, hey, there's this whole incident happening, the way it was handled internally, people calling for other people's jobs. We're not going to get into that right now. So it's real tough because even if he comes back too, this team that can go from, hey, they're great, they're going to be vilified no matter where on the road they go. Like I've seen some questionable signs in Hamilton from fans, but like, they're going to give it to them. Like I just don't like that's the other part too with all this is that I understand being a villain in sports sometimes is one thing, but there's villainy from play is one thing, but villainy because you did something bad, that's a whole nother thing, and that's something I think too Toronto has to take into consideration with all this.
Yeah, I mean it's again, it's not just about what he does on the field, it's the perception off the field as well. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's where they dropped the ball with this whole thing. Because you had prominent female staff around the league say how this situation and seeing how Kelly has responded to it not show any sort of credible desire to do the right thing and to make women feel like they're safe working in the CFL, right? It's tough. Women in sports have a very tough role in a male dominated industry, and the last thing you want is for that fear to come front and center. So I think the league has to figure out again. They kind of did our hands are tied when Kelly was at rookie camp. Yeah, their hands were tied based on they had the Argos was at the Argos discretion, but
Yeah.
the league could have said, "Look, might not be the best thing if he's there." We would like the league can tell the teams, tell the Argos, it might not be like let's let this cool down a little bit here. Let's keep him away from this situation. And I think the Argos also that's something they should have done. That's what I was surprised about.
Yeah.
You know, MLSE, this is a very big deal, very public, very front and center for this organization. I was very surprised that they kind of added to that fire a little bit rather than, you know what, let's just let the story go out the way it should, which is let the legal process handle out, let the suspension, let all that stuff happen. Let's not add to that. And unfortunately they did it when he was at camp. They felt like, the CFL gave them every right to do it, but it was up to their discretion. And unfortunately, their discretion got a lot of blowback. I think it says a lot, though, because we hear a lot about how CFL fans aren't there. They don't really care too much because these stadiums aren't always packed. But when they don't like something, they say it, and
Yeah.
teams listen. Teams listen. I think that's one thing about the CFL. They listen to their supporters. So I'm glad they did. I know people are saying, well, they wish they had made the right decision. Sometimes it's tough to understand what the right decision is. But once you get there, it's now important that you learn from it and learn why it didn't work out there.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you're a kid and you did something stupid and you get in trouble. I'm not comparing the two. I'm just giving this as an example. And basically, it's not just like you getting yelled at for you doing something wrong. It's your parents also explaining to you, hey, what you did was wrong, and this is why. Now, like we say too, like the woman in sport angle is huge because look, like hell, one of the first people I ever met in this industry was Sarah, and she's like diehard CFL. Like the amount of female reporters and female personnel I interacted with during Grey Cup week was insurmountable. Like just it was insane. And even too from the fan point of view, like how you say listen to the supporters, because the one thing I want to point out with the Grey Cup is look, I know with NFL fans you see fighting in the stands all the time. I've yet to hear any reports of that, witness any of that, because at Grey Cup, you know what it felt like? It felt like the last day of school. Big party, fans from all different teams, even if you don't like them. Like it's a friendly rivalry. It's not a my team lost, so I'm gonna kill this person. No, it's a yeah, it sucks like this and this, but at the same time too, like how you have all this cohesion together. That's why it's like a family environment. And when you have a fractured relationship, you got to do a lot to fix it. You got to do a lot to show, hey, not only are you sorry for your actions, but you're remorseful too, and you're accepting and willingness to learn
Mm-hmm.
from that. And I think that's what Randy Ambrosie's got to see from Chad Kelly. Not only are you sorry and you're regretful for what you did, but you've learned from it because, like you said, because of the checkered past, because of look, some of the stuff that happened to him in college, like you said, the drunken incident with the Broncos Halloween party, I think in 2018 it was, or whenever it happened. Just one of those things where you got to do more to help yourself than to hurt yourself. And if Chad can continue to do that, look, you're only going to build yourself up more because if you just come back and you're that same person, no one's going to buy into you. No one's going to like you. And with an entity like MLSC, where look, new ownership has changed, and I know the Argos aren't the. We all know what MLSC's biggest priority is. It's the first two letters of the name. But Keith Pelly's going to probably want to step in and do something because Keith Pelly cares a lot about the CFL. He's a big reason why the CFL is still as relevant as it is. And that's not a knock on the CFL. It's just because we know in the 90s there was a lot of trouble and TSN was the big player getting that back and involved. So there is a lot of work to do. But you know what? I hope at the end of the day that like Chad and even I want to go to pinball for a second from that press conference with Third Down Nation, Dan Ralph, and Shinetti and Naylor. I know a lot of people were like, oh, he's giving cookie cutter answers or he's not giving the full truth. Look, I think he's just saying he's trying to stay as quiet as can be because there's situations like this. Like I even remember hearing about the Chicago Blackhawks incident where some insiders, everyone's like saying, oh, they're so quiet. No, Elliot Friedman came out and said, look, if we get something wrong, we can get in a lot of trouble legally. So pinball's doing the exact same thing. And I completely understand that where it's like, look, there's already enough gasoline on the fire. I put any more, this whole thing's going to ignite and just be unraveling worse and worse and worse. And it's just going to explode. And they didn't want to see that. So that's just another point I wanted to make too on the matter.
Yeah, and MLSC has to understand that they need to take the Argos a little more seriously. I'm
Yeah.
not saying they don't, but what I'm saying is that this is a situation they should have been more involved with right from the top to the bottom. It is a big situation. It's a lawsuit. Lawsuits don't look good on a team.
Nope.
So I think with pinball I think he's learning a lot from this in that he needs to have more authority and understanding when things like this happen. Like the fact that he had no idea that this was happening shocks me because if there's anyone that I thought would have handled this the right way, it would have been
Yeah.
Pinball. Because I know the type of person he is. I know the type of legacy he has built in this city. Nobody would have thought that this would have happened under his watch. The fact that he didn't know about it, that's a little troubling in my opinion. But I also believe him when he says that. Because I do think that this was kind of kept under the rug. In my opinion, the people who kept it on the rug should have been, I'm not saying let have their jobs taken away, but they should have had a little more, like there should have been a little more done to find out why exactly did this happen and why wasn't this properly vetted and reported. And that was the CFL's kind of wording on it too. But also the CFL not making the full report available to people like ourselves. I would like to know the
Yeah.
full details. I don't need, they can black out the person's name, although we know most of us who cover the team know who it is, and I would never reveal that to the public. Although
Right.
some people in the public do know it as well, because again, the thing about these teams is it's like family, right? They treat this like as they know a lot of people within the organization. This isn't like, again, when we talk about this difference between the CFL and the NFL, you don't see, you know, you don't see fans having that type of access to everyone on the team. It's so much different than it is here in the CFL. That's what makes this a tough situation for fans to kind of go through because they don't want to see their team being dragged like this because because of the work that they put to establishing these communities.
Here's even the other thing too with that. Like one example, like as soon as you said the relationship they have, the perfect example of that was I remember last year the Ottawa Red Black game. Javon Leake ties an Argonauts record, and he gave the ball to just a random. He gave the ball to a woman. I don't know if she was random or not, but do you remember what I'm talking about? I think you were the one who tweeted about it.
Yes.
Yes, like that's the thing too. Like even after games, the fact that they're willingly interacting with fans, they're willingly like. It's not like NFL, like you don't see them, like you get that close to them, you're like either on a list or something like that. But like even to like team security, it's like there's that just overall relationship of like, hey, look, it's a family environment. That's why this is such a dark negative cloud. Like even if for some reason Chad's in the building on game days, like there's no way you get him. You let him like I know there's always I think he leaves a different way to begin with, but it's just like you said, less is more. You gotta stay away from it. And the pinball thing is 1,000% true because look, one of the greatest Argonauts of all time, just one of the friendliest people you can meet. And if he had known about this, look, this would have been put to a hush a second because pinball seems like that guy where, look, he'll be your best friend, but the second it's time to go to work, he puts his foot down, he goes to work because at the end of the day, he knows what winning a championship means to these fans. That's the thing about the CFL. Every fan base, when they win a title, they're over the moon, they're excited, they love it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. That's why I say for Hamilton too, going back to that point where it's 25 years without a championship is like the Leaf style drought of 50, almost 60 years, just because there's 9 teams. And even too, like a team like Ottawa, who's revitalized, has won a Grey Cup sooner, ironically, in Toronto. But at the end of the day, look, all we can just wish for is that the victim, like all the best from her, all the best for her, and that look at the end of the day, hopefully Chad's learned his lesson and he just learns to be a better person because look, this isn't like the NFL where you can screw up and people can quickly forget about it or it can get swept under the rug. And I'm not trying to say this is no, not at all. But this is a league where people are going to remember you for that. It's going to be a black cloud that hangs over you. And the quicker you can change your image and get the trust of fans back, not just Argonaut fans, the greater that's going to do for you. And here's the other thing, too, the greater that's going to do for fans of other teams within the league.
No, exactly, right. And so they gotta the net. I wrote about this. I said everything they do or everything they've done has been under a fine microscope, and that spotlight is going to get brighter and brighter with each decision that they make from here on out. And I think they got to do a better job of thinking twice before they act or thinking twice before something is done. They waited a long time before they made the decision on the suspension. People were getting upset, and I said, "Why are you getting upset? This is a very delicate matter.
Yeah.
It's you need like people were calling me and asking me what's taking so long." I said, there's a lot of legal ramifications if you don't handle this properly. Like you can't just go and put out an investigation and a report out and a decision without properly going through all the channels. There's a lot of things lawyers have to be kind of consulted in the any of these situations. So I think people need to understand that. Again, we become I hate to say it, we become also reactionary with a lot of things. Like everything has to have some sort of reaction. This is a very serious situation, but we have to understand that it's a delicate situation that needs time to be handled properly.
And the fact too, that's why I brought up the Elliot Friedman thing in the pinball press conference, where oh, why aren't they saying anything? Why are they reporting on it? And then they basically realize, look, you say or do the wrong thing, the ramifications of everything goes well beyond what happens in the locker room and on the field. This goes to the courthouses. This goes through not only lawyers from the victim, but lawyers from the team, lawyers from the league. There's multiple legal levels to this where, look, you can't do anything about it because if you do the wrong thing or you react too quickly, guess what? That's just like I said earlier. It opens up for more trouble, and that's what the CFL is trying to avoid right now is getting into more trouble. And even with the pinball press conference too, that's why he's saying we're letting our legal team handle it. It's the famous expression, less is more. I know people want more and they want the information now. Look, it's like another dark situation. It's like the London. It's like the stuff with the what's going on with the Hockey Canada stuff with what happened in London in 2018. It's the exact same thing. It's like why does it take so long? Look, when it comes to legal, there's a lot of steps that get involved because if you overstep those bounds or if you overstep your steps, you're just going to get yourself in more trouble. And that's something, look, that everyone wants to avoid. Everyone wants this done the right way, but the legally right way.
Yeah, it has to be. There can't be any doubt that anything was missed.
Yes,
Like the Hockey
absolutely.
Canada situation, they reopened that investigation because things were missed, things weren't done right, and now it's become such a big story because it wasn't done right. And I think it's a cautionary tale that if you don't do things right, it's going to come back to bite you.
1,000%. 1,000%. Um, look, just to switch gears now, like obviously, look, we've been talking about a lot today with the CFL, whether it be everything with Toronto, offensively, defensively. One thing I want to jump back to with Toronto before we end up wrapping up and maybe talk about a couple other things is if the team were to get off to a bad start, regardless of what's going on with the personnel situation, I'm going to say this right now. I don't think people should overreact to it. I just think that, look, last year was a dream season, 16-2, but you almost want to see them go through their struggles early on because let's be honest, last year, their two losses, I still feel like this. I also, to toot my own horn, I called them losing to Calgary. That felt like a trap game to me. Just like, that felt like the game to lose. But I feel like if there's a couple games where you had lost earlier on, it only helps you in the long run.
Well, that's it, right? The Argos didn't like the way the schedule was done because there weren't off week. Like they didn't have a break. They had to make their own bye weeks. Guys had to take their own days off and things like that. Um,
August was the last bye week.
Yeah, and the way that they played Hamilton so many times in a period as well when they weren't very competitive. Again, and no disrespect to the Tiger Cast, but that was not a good season by them last year. We can kind of say that the Argos had to try to make their own competition, and it's tough. It's tough to do that, but it just also speaks to the level of attention that needs to be put towards a whole season, right?
Yes.
It's all from, and everything can be undone in one game. And I think the Argos learned that lesson. They learned that lesson in 2021 when they won the division, but there were cracks that needed to be fixed. They fixed them. Now they got to go and do it again. They're gonna have to do with some people from the organization gone that have played a big part in it. And that's going to be the challenge. I think they're going to have their own. There's going to be some doubt. This is the first time they've ever really had doubt thrown at them. I mean, they've had doubt before, but this year specifically. I think it's only going to help them.
Yeah.
If they embrace it, if they embrace everything that's been thrown at them, it's only going to help them as a team, in my opinion.
Look, I always say this is the thing I say with football, especially. you learn from your mistakes. So that's the thing. You got to learn early on with mistakes of, look, we made this mistake now. We know we can get better from this. Last year there wasn't a lot of mistakes that they made, so it's just kind of like, hey, let's just keep doing things our way. Let's just keep going on about everything to where then it gets to a point of, hey, when you start making mistakes, aka these final, you don't know how to patch them in time. Like that's why I go back to that when I said it earlier when they started running Chad Kelly and quarterback sneaks. I think it was just when you overthink, you overanalyze. That's when you always set yourself up for failure. Meanwhile, with Montreal, the why not us mentality is the scariest thing to have in the CFL for an opposing team because look, they've got nothing to lose on that sideline. Montreal lost the East Final last year. Would have been is what it is. Toronto was best team all year, setting up the rematch we all thought we were going to get. Instead, look, we got an electric game in Hamilton. Meanwhile, this year, look, there's a few bumps in the road early on, and here's the other thing that too, from a selfish standpoint, I look, I'm still very young in my reporting days, but I remember I was scared out of my mind going into that press conference after these final because I didn't know I didn't want to say the wrong words because I didn't know how to handle a losing press conference. Where I don't want to ask the wrong question and get a player pissed off at me. And I remember the only question I asked was Winton saying, "How do you guys learn from this and move it and apply it going forward?" And he always said, "You learn more from losses than you do from wins." So this year, if and I look back to last year too, because there's two games I want to point out. The game in Montreal and then the game against Calgary at home.
Right.
A couple of losses. The Calgary one was a fun game just because look, it was it was literally a carnival outside of the stadium, and it was a carnival inside of the stadium. You think about it and you think, hey, if they had lost that game earlier on, could they have won in November? But you can't answer that. So for this year, if they make those mistakes earlier on, it can only help them. And at the end of the day, too, like you said, with the East, I think Hamilton will be in the mix. I just think they'll be somewhere between like 8 and 11 wins. I don't know if they'll be any higher than that. Same with and Montreal. I think can be. I think it's between Montreal and Toronto, honestly, for the division. I know a lot of people are just kind of sleeping on Toronto right now because of everything off field, but at the end of the day, I still feel like Ryan Dinwiddie can get them to play. My biggest wild card in the East, though, is what are the Ottawa Red Blacks for 2024?
Well, they're a team that needs a quarterback to step up and
Yeah,
help guide this team. They haven't really had. Oh my goodness, I'm trying to think of the last
Burris.
Well, no, I would say it was Harris, Trevor
Oh yeah,
Harris when he
Trevor.
was there.
Yeah.
They haven't been like I said when he left that was the biggest blow that team could have, and it turned out to be true. Um, they're doing the right thing, and they're not leaving the to chance with Mazzoli. They went and got a quarterback who showed that he can do it, but cautionary tale: not every CFL backup can translate into a starter. They want Drew Brown to be the guy. I just remember that the Argos years ago, okay, when Ricky Ray was still around, they tried to get a little head of of the curve and trying to get it and look at his replacement. Um, and I'll never forget this situation because James Franklin was viewed as the next guy because he was the backup in Edmonton. He was doing so well. So the Argos go and they trade for him, and it didn't click. He just couldn't handle being. He was. I just remember he was the most outgoing, really positive guy, and it kind of changed a little bit after his first season. They tried to get him with a new mentality, injuries, and then McLeod Bethel Thompson took over. Not every backup is capable of handling that next step. It's one thing to be a backup, one thing to be a starter. I mean, Drew Brown's in a position where there's pressure, but manageable expectations. He's 27,
Yeah.
which in the CFL is still young. Some may shake their head at 27. Like, not everyone's Nathan Rourke, right? That was a very unique situation. Drew Brown is still technically young in many eyes in the CFL, but I think what he went through last year in Winnipeg helped him in a big way for sure. I would just say you gotta be a little careful. Let him. Like, Ottawa should expect better things this year, but don't expect to go from bottom go through this huge jump. There's still a lot of work to be done there in Ottawa.
They're 1,000% work in progress team. Just think from this year, it's don't get ran off the field so much. I think that's the big mentality. You got to win some games that like you're in. You can't let those losses get by you. Like the biggest example from that was last year of how Saskatchewan beat Winnipeg in the Banjo Bowl, and then there was that whole stuff with Zach Caleros getting the headshot, and then he killed him the next week, and then Saskatchewan lost out, and that's what started this new culture shift there. So for Ottawa, like I said, look, you got to be competitive. Even if you do only win like 6 or 7 games, you just got to be competitive throughout the entire year. The only other team with quarterback concerns I really have, I don't want to say Edmonton, even though they brought in McLeod, Bethel Thompson again. I liked what I saw from Trey Ford, but I'll remember this. I always go back to the Grey Cup just because this is a very prominent conversation I had. It was just a couple Stamps fans. They like the team. They just don't know what to do at quarterback. Jake Mayer is still a huge question mark for them.
Oh, I mean, they brought in Matthew Schultz in Calgary. That will help because I think it gives Jake Mayer incentive that he doesn't have his seat is hot, not on fire but hot.
Yeah,
and I do think that I'm not high on Calgary this year. This is the one of those years where I haven't been thrilled with what they've done. Although they seem to be raving over in Calgary. Maybe they're going to go in a new direction here, but I haven't seen it. I think that the talent in the West is just too much to overcome. BC's good. Winnipeg's good. Saskatchewan's getting better. Edmonton is improving too. Calgary has kind of they're paying for not preparing for that transition period. They got gutted when Ryan Dinwiddie left. It wasn't just Dinwiddie that left. They had a bunch of guys.
They're all in Toronto now.
All in Toronto, right? It became to the point where now Toronto's sort of getting the reverse effect where everyone's kind of leaving Toronto to go get money. But I think Calgary is still recovering from that, and unfortunately, they're gonna have to work on. Calgary's gonna have some work to do, and I feel like the best thing for them isn't to be that mid-level team. Go younger, get more, establish your younger guys, because Winnipeg's getting older. They can't This can't last forever for Winnipeg.
Yeah,
Saskatchewan, they're a bit of a blend, a hybrid. They got some veterans, but there's also some younger guys there. BC, it is I would say more of a veteran team, but it's also a team that's lost a lot of talent too. There's openings in the West, but I don't think it's Calgary's year to try to think that they're going to make a big move.
That's it. Like you said, Winnipeg too. They have the team where they have Vernon Adams still there. They've still got a bunch of guys. They've still got like Dominique Rhymes, a few other players as well. But I just remember asking the fans about that. My first question was, "What do you think about quarterback?" And when your fans are saying they don't know much about they don't have much trust in the quarterback, that's where it's the problem. Because I know Dinwiddie was high on Mayer when they brought him in originally as a rookie.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're in that transition period and there are question marks at quarterback, we've seen that's not a good thing to have, no matter what level of football you're playing, no matter if it's college, no matter if it's the pros, whether it's in Canada, USA, or in the UFL. Winnipeg to me is, I am never ever counting them out because I always remember that 2022 was a surprise loss in the Grey Cup. I heard some words I'm not going to repeat on air when I saw them walking back into the locker room after the Grey Cup last year. Because, folks, for those of you who don't know, so last year at the Grey Cup in Hamilton, David was in the press box. I was very fortunate to be there, but I was in the media workroom in the basement, but which was situated across the hallway from Winnipeg's locker room, which is the away locker room for CFL. And they're like, it's one of those things where you just kept your mouth shut and you don't say a single word. You just watch them walk in. I think it was one person from Third Down Nation and a handful of Winnipeg beat reporters who went in there and talked to them. And
that's the thing about the job, though.
Yeah.
You got to be able to handle those moments, and I know they got a lot of gold. I talked. Were you in the bus with us when we went back to the hotel?
Yeah. My last DM from you before me asking you to come back on was you saying, "Hey, are you coming on the bus?" Because I was still in Montreal's locker room.
Yeah, I just I did all my interviews on the field. That was something else. But that Winnipeg, I talked to all the reporters and man, just dejected. Like hearing the comments. And I do think that it's a learning step for that team, right? They went through two tough losses. Can they rebound from that? Because as good as we were talking about Winnipeg dynasty, right?
Yeah,
Then winning Grey Cups back to back, winning back to back. They also lost back to back. It kind of, I think that's a team that's going to be very motivated to prove some doubters wrong.
that's where it's kind of scary, like how Kansas City in their back to backs the last couple of years, it was always they don't they like look at how they're playing. They don't have the thing to do it. Then you snap your fingers and they're there. That's why even though they lost the Grey Cup, they have the best odds for a reason. They still have a stacked roster. The fact too, I know they're a veteran heavy team, but they still have some damn good veterans and they were able to re-sign them. Because I remember on the bus too hearing there's a lot of guys we don't know. Are they going to retire? Are they going to go elsewhere? Or what are they going to do? Brady Oliveira too, being a local kid. They're a team playing with nothing to lose, and essentially that's going to be very scary considering the juggernaut that they are. And there's a very good chance that we see them in Vancouver come November for the Grey Cup. The whole league this year, it's going to be very exciting because, like I said, I feel like besides Calgary and Ottawa, you can make a case for every team to, I'm not saying win, but get to a Grey Cup. Like for your Edmontons and your Saskatchewans and your Hamiltons, it's kind of that, hey, if you guys catch lightning in a bottle at the right time, who knows what you can do. For your Toronto and your Montreals, it's just trying to stay on the throne that you've built as the last two champions. And then for BC and Winnipeg, it's the exact same thing. Actually, no, it's not. It's Winnipeg. It's can you stay the top dog in the league like you've been the last few seasons in the sense of just always finishing first. And then for BC, it's hey, you can finish your story at home in front of your fans, winning your first Grey Cup in almost 15 years, I believe. I don't think they've won since 2011.
Yeah. No, it's Winnipeg is a team that I'm very curious to see how they respond. Chris Streveler's back too. That brings back a different dimension to that offense. I'm very curious to see how Winnipeg responds because again, as I said, not a team that's getting younger, and they had to work to bring back two key players. Sorry, and I do think that there is something to be said about tough losses either motivate you or mentally it's just too hard of a roadblock to overcome. They've done it. They haven't been able to overcome the loss, right? Back to back, they've lost. They've done well in the regular season, but I think every team in the league figured out they're beatable.
Yeah.
They're beatable. Zach Claros hasn't had great Grey Cup performances in back to back. And I think that says something to how teams want to go after him. And I think it's on Zach Claros to be the one to be the game changer for them. And that's the big thing for me.
Yeah, that's exactly like even because I think of the last couple Grey Cups, like you have the great, I think it was the quarterback run by Chad Kelly for like 20 or 30 yards in 2022. And then last
Mhm.
year, there's two plays that stick out to me. Obviously, there was the game winning touchdown route
Yeah.
by Tyson Philpott, but then there was a third down catch late in the game by Cole Speaker because I remember asking Cody after the game, like just about everyone out there, like because I know Austin Mack at huge game Philpott, but then he went out of his way to mention guys like Sneed, went out of ways to mention guys like Cole Speaker, knowing that look, you're getting contributions from all facets of the football because the CFL is another. It's like the NFL. I know everyone's like, oh, it's not the NFL. It is in the sense where you need your quarterback, your offense to be playing great, your defense to be playing great, and make key plays when it matters most, and for your special teams to be electric. Because the one thing that the CFL still has great is a damn good return game. And I got spoiled last year watching Javon Leake return some damn good kicks.
Yeah. Special teams make special plays.
Yeah.
But actually, that's one thing. The Argos don't really have a returner. They haven't really figured that spot out yet. So we'll see how that works out.
Is it safe to say that I have faith in Mickey Donovan as a special teams coordinator to get that figured out?
I think it's. I don't think it's bad to think that way. think you're right to think that. It's gonna take some time for sure.
Yeah, that's it. It's gonna take some time to figure out, but just for the most part with that, I just think that all the coaches. That's the other thing with Mace too. I didn't think Mace was leaving because he signed an extension when Donovan signed one. Because it was Ryan signed one, I think, at training camp last year, but then it came out in July, and then you had everyone else sign one throughout the season when it's like, hey, everyone else is doing good, so let's reward them too. So that's where I say that comment with Mickey Donovan. I think like the first couple games, that's where the unsung heroes can kind of come out. Like, like the Makai Polk that they signed today from who's been around the NFL and who plays college ball at Mississippi State. The fact that I think there's a lot of talent that they've brought in that people may not know about yet that are going to catch people off guard, and then everyone's going to look and go, huh, look at that guy make a play. Oh, look at that guy. Oh, look at that guy. And if you can find someone like that to return kicks, sky's the limit.
Well, I definitely agree. I do think that you can find ways. There's guys that get put on waivers, get cut that you can
Absolutely.
go and grab as well. But yeah, I think it would be a little too early to be worried about the kick return game, but it is important. You can't be overlooked because the Argos have had like Javon Leake, but made game changing plays last year,
They won the Calgary game because of him. That
and
home game.
you don't say that a lot, right? But I think it's something that has to be said about their commitment to all three phases. That's how you win all three phases.
That's just it. That's
Mhm.
literally it. Especially in the CFL, because like, look, I always say NFL special teams, you can have some moments, but special teams, special players, Tuesday. What's up, brother? But you know what, David? This was a blast getting to have to do. We'll have to do this again before the season starts. Obviously, folks, D_Morassutti on Twitter. But if they want to read about your Toronto Argonauts work like I do, I get the emails. Where can they find you?
Yeah, so go to my X profile. You can sign up for my newsletter there. Goes right to your email as soon as I hit publish. I have done some CFL work for sports as well, so I kind of certain stories will go there. Argo stories mostly go to the newsletter. Again, keep everyone informed. It's free. That's the best part. It's free.
Yes.
So go out and check that out. And we're going to be doing it all season long. We'll keep it going.
CFL season's back, baby. This has been
Yeah, it is.
episode number 295 of YWC Football Talk. 300 is going to be here before you know it, folks. Enjoy your week.